My sister accused me of stealing her necklace just so she could call me a liar. Then my parents kicked me out. What she didn't know was that I'd been paying her tuition and covering the household bills. So I stopped, walked out, and left. What happened next? Imagine sacrificing everything, years of your life, every penny you earned, for the people you love most, only to have them accuse you of theft and throw you out like trash. That's exactly what happened to me when my own sister accused me of stealing, and my parents, the very people who preached family above all else, believed her without a second thought. Little did they know, I'd been quietly paying their mortgage, all their utilities, and yes, even Olivia's entire college tuition for years. Growing up, being the eldest daughter in the Martinez family came with its own set of expectations. My parents, Miguel and Anna, they were big on family. Huge family is forever, my dad would always preach during Sunday dinners. When everything else falls away, blood remains. Those words, they really stuck with me. They shaped every single decision I made through childhood and into my early 20s. We lived in a modest suburban home in Connecticut, nothing fancy, but comfortable enough that I never worried about the basics. But then, everything changed. The 2008 recession hit hard. My dad's construction business, once thriving with 15 employees, took a devastating blow. Major clients went bankrupt, owing him hundreds of thousands. Within 18 months, he had to lay off everyone, eventually filing for bankruptcy himself. The shame of failure weighed heavily on him. He found work as a foreman for another company, but his income was cut by more than half. As if that wasn't enough, my mom was diagnosed with severe rheumatoid arthritis that same year. Medical bills started piling up, quickly draining their savings. They refinanced the house twice just to stay afloat. By the time I graduated college in 2018, they were barely making ends meet, though they desperately tried to hide it from me and my sister. Olivia is 7 years younger than me. While I witnessed our family's slow financial decline, she was largely shielded from the harsh realities. My parents, especially Dad, were determined that at least one of their daughters would have a normal childhood. That meant while I used second-hand textbooks and worked part-time jobs all through high school and college, Olivia still got new clothes, the latest phones, even a car for her 16th birthday. Honestly, I never resented her for it, it wasn't her fault. But it did create a fundamental difference in how we viewed money and responsibility. I became thrifty and self-reliant, while Olivia, well, she just expected her needs and wants to be met without much effort on her part. After graduating with a computer science degree, I was lucky. I landed a job at a growing tech company. My starting salary was decent, and I quickly proved my value, earning 3 promotions in as many years. By 25, I was making 6 figures as a senior developer, with stock options adding substantially to my net worth. I bought a small, modern apartment, just 20 minutes from my parents' home, and established myself as completely financially independent. It was during a casual visit home 3 years ago that I truly understood just how dire my parents' financial situation had become. Mom and Olivia were out shopping, and Dad received a call he took in the garage. Curious about his hushed tone, I quietly followed and overheard him pleading with the mortgage company for an extension on a late payment. After he hung up, I found him sitting in his old pickup truck, head in hands, silently crying. That moment changed everything. When I confronted him, his pride initially made him defensive, but eventually, the truth spilled out. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage. Mom's medical bills had created substantial debt, and they'd been using credit cards to cover basic expenses for months. The final blow? Olivia's acceptance to an expensive private university with a $45,000 annual tuition. They had promised her they would cover it, unwilling to disappoint her or admit they couldn't afford it. That night, I made a decision that would alter our family dynamics forever, though none of us realized it at the time. I offered to help temporarily with some bills until they got back on their feet. Dad reluctantly agreed, but with one condition: Olivia must never know. It would crush her to learn we're struggling, he insisted, and your mother would be humiliated if the neighbors found out we needed help from our daughter. What started as helping with some bills quickly expanded. Within 6 months, I was paying their entire mortgage, all utilities, property taxes, and most of Mom's medical expenses. When Olivia started college, I took on her full tuition payments as well. All told, I was contributing over $70,000 annually to keep my family afloat, nearly 2/3 of my take-home pay. Despite living 20 minutes away in my own apartment, I visited at least twice weekly, bringing groceries that I claimed were on sale or extras from work events. I helped Dad with house repairs on weekends, drove Mom to medical appointments, and even helped Olivia with her programming homework when she struggled in her introductory CS course. Last Christmas, I watched as my parents gave Olivia the latest MacBook Pro, supposedly from them. In reality, I had purchased it, as I did most substantial gifts from them over the past few years. Olivia hugged our parents tightly, gushing about how much she loved them. I received a sweater and a gift card. I told myself I didn't mind. Seeing my family happy was enough. For Olivia's 20th birthday 2 months ago, my parents wanted to give her something special. She had been dropping hints about an $8,000 white gold and diamond necklace she'd seen at a boutique downtown. It's an investment piece, she had explained over dinner, something I'll keep forever and maybe even pass down someday. Mom looked distraught at the price tag, but Dad promised they'd figure something out. That something was me, of course. When Dad called, asking if I could loan them the money, I already knew it wasn't a loan. None of the money I'd given them had ever been repaid, nor did I expect it to be. I transferred the funds that day. A week later, I watched Olivia unwrap the blue velvet box at her birthday dinner, squealing with delight as Dad fastened the necklace around her neck. "You're the best parents ever," she declared, admiring her reflection. "I don't know anyone else whose parents would get them something this amazing." I smiled and took photos of the moment, ignoring the familiar ache in my chest. Part of me hoped that one day they would acknowledge all I had done. That my sacrifices would eventually be recognized and appreciated. That faith in my family's ultimate recognition kept me going, even as the balance in my savings account dwindled while Olivia's social media filled with photos of spring break trips and shopping sprees funded indirectly by me. I never imagined that necklace would become the catalyst for destroying the family I had sacrificed so much to preserve. Sunday dinners at my parents' house were a sacred tradition. No matter how busy our weeks got, we all made an effort to be there at 6 sharp. Mom would spend the afternoon cooking something special, Dad would open a bottle of wine, and for a few hours, we could pretend we were still the happy, financially stable family we had once been. That particular Sunday started like any other. I arrived early to help Mom prepare her specialty chicken enchiladas with homemade salsa verde. Dad and Olivia were watching a basketball game in the living room, occasionally cheering or groaning depending on the score. Everything felt normal until halfway through dinner, when Olivia suddenly put down her fork. "Has anyone seen my necklace?" she asked, her hand instinctively touching her bare throat. "The diamond one for my birthday. I was going to wear it tonight but couldn't find it in my jewelry box." "Did you check your dresser?" Mom suggested. "Sometimes you leave things there when you're in a hurry." Olivia shook her head. "I always keep it in the blue velvet box. It's too valuable to leave out." "When was the last time you wore it?" I asked, genuinely concerned. I knew how much that necklace meant to her, regardless of who had actually paid for it. "Last weekend, at Melissa's party," she replied. "I definitely put it back in its box when I came home." Dad's brow furrowed. "Are you sure? You were pretty tipsy when you got back from that party." "I wasn't that drunk," Olivia protested. "And I specifically remember putting it away because I was worried about losing it." Dinner was temporarily abandoned as we all helped search for the missing necklace. I followed Olivia to her bedroom, helping her check every drawer and surface. We looked under the bed, in pockets of clothing, even in the bathroom where she might have taken it off while getting ready. The more we searched without finding it, the more agitated Olivia became. "I don't understand," she muttered, growing increasingly frustrated. "It should be here." As the search expanded to the rest of the house, I noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Olivia's eyes followed me when I entered rooms. When I offered to check the laundry room, she quickly said she'd already looked there, though I knew she hadn't. Small moments of tension began building, like static electricity before a storm. We returned to the dining table after an hour of fruitless searching. The enchiladas had gone cold, but we reheated plates in the microwave and tried to salvage dinner. The conversation was stilted, with Olivia unusually quiet. "You were in my room earlier today, weren't you, Rebecca?" she suddenly asked, her voice carrying an edge I hadn't heard before. I paused mid-bite, confused. "What?" "No, I came straight to the kitchen when I arrived. I thought I saw you coming out when I was heading upstairs. I went up to use the bathroom once, but I didn't go in your room," I explained, increasingly uncomfortable with her tone. Mom shifted in her seat. Dad glanced between us, his expression unreadable. "That's strange," Olivia continued, "because my door was open when I got back upstairs, and I always close it." "Maybe Mom went in to put away laundry?" I suggested. Mom shook her head. "No, I didn't do laundry today." The implication hung in the air like a bad smell. No one was outright accusing me of anything, but the suggestion was clear enough. "Olivia," I said carefully, "if you're implying what I think you are, you're wrong. I had absolutely no reason to go into your room, and I definitely didn't take your necklace." She shrugged, but her eyes remained suspicious. "I'm just trying to figure out what happened. It's an $8,000 necklace. It doesn't just disappear." "Well, it didn't disappear into my pocket," I said, trying to keep my voice level despite my growing indignation. Dad cleared his throat. Rebecca, no one's accusing you of anything, he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. But you have to admit, it's a bit of a coincidence that the necklace goes missing on a day you visit. I visit twice a week, every week. I replied, stunned that he would even entertain the idea. Are you seriously suggesting I would steal from my own sister? Of course not, Mom interjected weakly, though she didn't meet my eyes. We're all just concerned. The remainder of dinner passed in uncomfortable silence. I offered again to help search, but Olivia declined, saying perhaps it would turn up on its own. The implication was clear. Once I left, maybe the necklace would mysteriously reappear. I drove home that night with a knot in my stomach. For the first time, I felt like an outsider in my own family. The people I had sacrificed so much for had just casually considered me capable of theft. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Just so you know, I've looked everywhere. It's definitely not in the house. I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Before I could decide, another text came through. If you took it as some kind of joke, it's not funny anymore. Just give it back and we can forget about it. I typed and deleted several responses before finally sending, I didn't take your necklace, Olivia. I would never do that to you. I hope you find it soon. Her reply was almost instantaneous, whatever. Just know Mom and Dad are really upset. Sleep eluded me that night as more messages arrived, each more accusatory than the last. By morning, it seemed my sister had fully convinced herself I was a thief, and based on her texts, my parents weren't far behind in that belief. What had started as a simple missing item had somehow morphed into a referendum on my character, and apparently, I was failing. The next morning, I woke to several missed calls from both my parents. Rather than returning them immediately, I decided to drive over and address the situation in person. If there was a misunderstanding, surely we could clear it up face to face. I still believed in our family's ability to communicate rationally, despite the uneasiness from the previous night. When I arrived at my parents' house around 10 a.m., the atmosphere was noticeably tense. Mom was washing dishes with unusual vigor, barely acknowledging my greeting. Dad sat at the kitchen table, his face grim, newspaper untouched beside his coffee. Where's Olivia? I asked, trying to sound casual. Upstairs, Dad replied curtly. She's been turning her room upside down all morning looking for that necklace. I took a deep breath. Look, I understand everyone's upset, but I need to make it absolutely clear that I had nothing to do with its disappearance. Before Dad could respond, Olivia appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of anger and what looked almost like triumph. Then how do you explain this? She demanded, holding up her empty blue velvet jewelry box. I found it in your old bedroom, shoved under the bookshelf. I stared at her, genuinely confused. That's impossible. I haven't been in that room in weeks. Well, Dad said, standing up, his voice had taken on an aggressive edge I rarely heard directed at me. The box didn't walk there on its own. Rebecca, if you're in some kind of financial trouble, you should have come to us instead of doing something like this. The irony of his statement was so profound I almost laughed. Me in financial trouble? When I was the one keeping their entire household afloat? Dad, this is ridiculous. I don't need money, and I certainly wouldn't steal from my own sister. Then how did the box get in your room? He demanded. It's not my room anymore. I haven't lived here in years. Anyone could have put it there, including Olivia, I added, the implication clear. Olivia gasped dramatically. Are you saying I planted it? Why would I do that? Mom finally turned from the sink. Please, let's not fight. I'm sure there's an explanation. Yes, there is. Dad said, his voice rising. The explanation is that someone took that necklace, and the evidence points to Rebecca. I felt my face flush with anger and hurt. What evidence? An empty box that could have been placed by anyone? That's not evidence, that's a setup. Why would anyone want to set you up? Dad challenged. I don't know. Why would I want to steal a necklace when I make more than enough money to buy my own if I wanted one? Throughout this heated exchange, I noticed something odd about Olivia's behavior. While she appeared distressed when my parents were looking at her, I caught a different expression when their attention was elsewhere, a slight curl of satisfaction at the corner of her mouth, quickly masked when she realized I was watching. Let's check the security camera, I suggested. My parents had installed a basic security system last year, with a camera covering the front porch and driveway. It would show if anyone left the house with something. Dad nodded stiffly, and we gathered around his laptop as he pulled up the footage from the previous day. We watched my arrival at 4 p.m., empty-handed except for a bag of groceries. Various angles showed nothing suspicious throughout the evening, and when I left around 9 p.m., I carried out only my purse and phone. The footage wasn't particularly high quality, but it was clear enough to see I hadn't taken a distinctive jewelry box. She could have put it in her purse, Olivia insisted. My purse isn't big enough to fit that box without being obviously misshapen, I countered. Maybe you took just the necklace then, she pressed. It would fit in a pocket. Dad rubbed his temples. Rebecca, if you needed money, you could have sold it. $8,000 would solve a lot of problems. The conversation was becoming increasingly absurd. While they continued speculating about my potential financial motives, my phone buzzed with a payment reminder. Ironically, it was for their mortgage, due in 3 days. Out of habit, I authorized the payment right there, $3,000 transferred from my account to cover their housing for another month. No one noticed as I performed this act of family support even while being accused of theft. I'm financially stable, I said, putting my phone away. Everyone has problems, Mom said softly. Even successful people get into trouble sometimes. I stared at her, hurt that she too seemed to believe I was capable of this. Mom, I haven't taken anything. Then why was the box in your room? Dad demanded again, as if repetition would somehow change the facts. I told you, I don't know. But there are plenty of explanations that don't involve me being a thief. As the accusations continued, I noticed Olivia typing on her phone, a slight smirk visible for just a moment. A terrible thought began forming in my mind. Was it possible she had deliberately engineered this situation? But why would she want to drive a wedge between me and our parents? Look, I said finally, my patience wearing thin. I understand the necklace is valuable and you're upset it's missing. But I've spent my entire life being honest and reliable. I've always been there for this family. Does it really make sense that I would suddenly decide to steal from you? Dad's expression hardened. People change, and sometimes we don't know someone as well as we think we do. Those words cut deeper than he could possibly know. After everything I had sacrificed, after all the support I had provided without recognition or thanks, my character was being questioned based on nothing but circumstantial evidence and my sister's accusations. I think you should leave until we figure this out, Dad said finally. Your mother is upset, and your presence is just making everything worse. I looked to Mom for support, but she averted her eyes, silently accepting Dad's decision. Olivia stood in the background, and for a split second, I caught that expression again, not sadness or confusion, but satisfaction. As I gathered my things to leave, I felt a profound sense of injustice washing over me. This wasn't just about a missing necklace anymore, it was about trust, respect, and the painful realization that despite everything I had done, my family would choose to believe the worst of me based on flimsy evidence. Walking to my car, I noticed Olivia watching from her bedroom window. Our eyes met briefly, and in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty this was no misunderstanding. Something more calculated was at play, though I couldn't yet grasp why my own sister would want to destroy my relationship with our parents. 3 days passed with minimal communication from my family. Mom sent a few noncommittal texts asking how I was doing, carefully avoiding any mention of the necklace. Dad remained silent. Olivia, meanwhile, had apparently been busy sharing her version of events with extended family members. This became painfully clear when I received a call from my Aunt Patricia, Dad's sister, asking if I would come to the house for a family discussion that evening. Her tone was gentle but firm, suggesting attendance wasn't optional if I wanted to remain part of the family. Everyone wants to resolve this situation, she explained. Your parents are very upset. I'm upset too, I replied. I've been accused of something I didn't do, and no one believes me. That's why we need to talk, she insisted. Please be there, Rebecca. I agreed, not because I expected a fair hearing, but because I couldn't bear the thought of being estranged from my family. Despite everything, I still loved them and desperately wanted to clear my name. When I arrived that evening, the scene that greeted me felt more like an intervention than a family discussion. Dad and Mom sat on the living room couch. Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert occupied the armchairs. Olivia perched on the piano bench, eyes red as if she'd been crying. My cousin Michael, who had never particularly liked me, stood by the fireplace with his arms crossed. Rebecca, Dad began as soon as I sat down, we've asked you here because this situation has gone on long enough. The necklace is still missing, and all evidence points to you taking it. What evidence? I demanded. An empty box that anyone could have planted? Olivia spoke up, her voice trembling theatrically. I've been doing some research, and the pawn shop downtown doesn't require ID for items under $10,000. They pay cash on the spot. The implication was clear. And I felt my face flush with anger. So now I've not only stolen your necklace, but pawned it? This is absurd. Is it? Dad challenged. You've been acting strange lately. Distracted. Checking your phone all the time. Making excuses to leave early. I almost laughed at the bitter irony. The phone checking was to manage their bills. The early departures were to make it to my second job, which I'd taken on 6 months ago to help cover Olivia's study abroad program for the upcoming semester. That doesn't prove anything, I said. Aunt Patricia leaned forward. Rebecca, honey, if you're in trouble, we want to help. But first, you need to be honest. I am being honest. I didn't take the necklace. Uncle Robert shook his head sadly. Denial only makes this harder for everyone. The conversation continued in this vein, with various family members taking turns explaining why confession would be best for everyone. No one entertained the possibility of my innocence, not even for a moment. It was as if they had already decided my guilt and were simply waiting for me to acknowledge it. Dad finally delivered his ultimatum, rising to his full height and pointing at me with a shaking finger. Rebecca, I'm going to say this once: either confess what you did with the necklace and return it, or get out of this house and don't come back until you're ready to tell the truth. I stared at him, speechless. In all my 28 years, I had never heard him speak to me with such coldness. Dad, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, I'm your daughter. You've known me my whole life. Do you really believe I would do this? The Rebecca I raised wouldn't, he answered. But people change. I turned to my mother, who had remained largely silent. Mom, do you believe I did this? She looked down at her hands, twisted together in her lap. Her silence was answer enough. The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. I had financially supported this family for years, sacrificed my own financial security, put my life on hold in countless ways, and this was what I received in return. Not just disbelief, but outright condemnation. I think we should check Rebecca's car, Michael suggested suddenly. If she hasn't pawned it yet, she might still have it there. Before I could protest, Dad was nodding. Good idea. Rebecca, give us your keys. This is ridiculous, I said, but found myself handing over my keys anyway, unwilling to appear uncooperative and further cement their suspicions. We all trooped outside to where my car was parked in the driveway. Dad unlocked it and began searching. While the family watched, he checked under the seats, in the glove compartment, and finally moved to the trunk. When he opened it, I heard several gasps. There, partially visible under a reusable grocery bag, was the distinctive blue velvet jewelry box. I stared in shock. That's not. I didn't put that there. Dad picked up the box and opened it, empty, of course. He turned to me, his expression a mixture of confirmation and disappointment. Still going to deny it? Someone planted that. I insisted, my voice rising with desperation. I haven't even opened my trunk in days. Convenient excuse, Michael muttered. Dad closed the trunk with a slam that seemed to echo my family's final judgment. I think we've seen enough, Rebecca. I want you to leave now. Don't contact us until you're ready to admit what you did and make it right. Dad, please. I begged, tears now flowing freely. Someone is setting me up. This isn't fair. What isn't fair, he said coldly, is stealing from your own sister and lying to our faces. I raised you better than this. I looked around at the faces of my family members. Some showed anger, others disappointment or sad resignation. Only Olivia's expression seemed odd. Behind the performative tears, there was something else, satisfaction, relief. I couldn't quite place it. Mom, I tried one last time, please say something. She finally looked up, her eyes wet but her resolve firm. Just go, Rebecca. Give us some time. Defeated and devastated, I gathered my purse and keys. As I was about to leave, Olivia pulled out her phone to check a notification. And that's when I saw it. In the reflection of her dark phone screen, just for an instant before she tilted it away, the unmistakable glint of her diamond necklace, partially visible beneath the collar of her sweater. The realization hit me like a physical blow. She had the necklace all along. This entire drama, the accusations, the family meeting, all of it was a deliberate setup. My own sister had orchestrated my exile from the family. I opened my mouth to expose her, but in that moment, I realized it would be pointless. They had already decided I was guilty. My word against hers would change nothing, especially without concrete proof in that exact moment. I walked to my car in silence, feeling their eyes on my back. As I drove away from the house I had financially supported for years, tears blurred my vision so badly I had to pull over a block away. Alone in my car, I finally allowed myself to break down completely, sobbing until my throat was raw and my eyes burned. The betrayal was absolute. Not just the false accusation, but the knowledge that my sister had deliberately engineered my downfall, and worse, that my parents, who I had sacrificed so much to support, had chosen to believe the worst of me without a moment's hesitation. When I finally made it back to my apartment, I sat in darkness for hours, replaying every moment of the past few days, trying to understand how my relationship with my family could disintegrate so completely. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Hope you're happy now. You've upset everyone." The sheer audacity of her message, after what she had done, crystallized something within me. This wasn't just about a necklace. It was about years of imbalance, of unacknowledged sacrifice, of enabling destructive family dynamics. Something had to change. And it was clear now that I would have to be the one to change it. I woke the next morning feeling oddly calm. The emotional storm of the previous night had passed, leaving behind a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and began a systematic review of my financial situation. For the first time, I created a comprehensive spreadsheet detailing every dollar I had contributed to my family over the past 3 years. Mortgage payments, $108,000. Utilities, approximately $12,600. Property taxes, $22,500. Mom's medical bills, $47,800. Olivia's tuition and expenses, $151,200. Miscellaneous support, including groceries, car repairs, and gifts, roughly $35,000. The grand total made me physically ill, $377,100 over 3 years. More than $350,000. Enough for a substantial down payment on a house. Enough to have fully funded my retirement accounts. Enough to have changed the trajectory of my own financial future. The spreadsheet also revealed uncomfortable truths about my current situation. My savings had dwindled to less than 2 months of living expenses. I had been making minimum payments on my own credit card to free up cash for my family's needs. My 401k contributions had been reduced to capture just the company match, far less than financial advisors recommended for someone my age. In short, I had been sacrificing my own financial health and future security for a family that had just accused me of theft and thrown me out of their lives. Around noon, I called Janet Perez, a financial advisor I had consulted briefly when I first started earning substantial money. She agreed to see me that afternoon, and I brought my spreadsheet and supporting documentation to her office. "Rebecca," she said after reviewing the numbers, her expression a mixture of concern and disbelief, "this level of financial support is unsustainable. It's admirable that you wanted to help your family, but you've put your own financial security at serious risk." "I know that now," I admitted. "But I need to understand my options going forward. Am I legally obligated to continue any of these payments?" She shook her head firmly. "Absolutely not. Unless you've signed contracts specifically committing to these payments, which I'm guessing you haven't, you have no legal obligation to continue financial support. These were gifts, not legally binding commitments. Even the tuition payments? There's no way they could force me to continue those? The university has a contract with the student, or whoever signed the tuition agreement, not with you as a third-party payer. If you've been making payments directly to the school without signing any documents, you can stop at any time." I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. "What about the mortgage?" "My name isn't on it, but I've been making the payments for years." "Same principle applies. The mortgage agreement is between your parents and the bank. Your voluntary payments don't create a legal obligation to continue." To be absolutely certain, I also scheduled a consultation with a lawyer later that afternoon. Attorney William Chin confirmed everything Janet had told me. I had no legal obligation to continue financial support to my family. Any moral obligation, he pointed out gently, had to be weighed against their treatment of me and my own needs. Family financial support is a choice, not a requirement, he explained, especially when there's been a significant breach of trust. Armed with this information, I returned home and began gathering evidence of my financial support, bank statements showing transfers to my parents' accounts, records of direct payments to Olivia's university, utility bills in my parents' names with payment confirmations from my accounts. I organized everything chronologically in a binder, creating an irrefutable record of my contributions. As I worked, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway, half expecting a collection agency looking for my parents. Instead, I heard a familiar voice. "Rebecca? It's Melissa. Olivia's roommate from freshman year." I hadn't spoken to Melissa in months, though we'd always been friendly. "Hi Melissa, this is unexpected." "Yeah, I know. Look, I overheard something yesterday that I think you should know about." I was at the coffee shop near campus when Olivia came in with some friends. I was in the corner booth, and they didn't see me. My heart began beating faster. What did you hear? She was bragging, Rebecca, about how she'd gotten rid of you. Those were her exact words. She was laughing about it, saying, now your parents would stop comparing them to you all the time. The confirmation of my suspicions should have hurt, but instead, it fueled my resolve. Did she mention a necklace? Yeah, she said something about hiding it and making it look like you took it. I couldn't hear everything, but it was definitely deliberate. I always thought you were really nice, so when I heard that, it didn't sit right with me. Thank you for telling me, Melissa. I really appreciate it. After we hung up, I sat in silence for several minutes, processing this final piece of evidence. My sister's betrayal had been completely intentional, a calculated move to remove me from the family picture. And my parents had been all too willing to believe the worst of me, despite years of evidence to the contrary. With newfound determination, I began systematically canceling all automatic payments related to my family. The mortgage payment scheduled for next week? Cancelled. Utility auto payments? Turned off. Olivia's tuition installment for the upcoming semester? Withdrawn. For each cancellation, I documented the process and saved confirmation numbers. This wasn't just about cutting financial ties, it was about reclaiming control of my own resources and future. Next, I drafted a formal letter to my family. It was factual and unemotional, detailing the exact financial support I had provided over the years and informing them that, effective immediately, all such support was terminated. I included copies of key documents proving my contributions, enough to make the magnitude of my support undeniable, without overwhelming them with the full binder of evidence. As I prepared to mail the letter, I hesitated briefly. Was I being too harsh? Would this cause genuine hardship, especially for my mother with her medical needs? I thought of alternatives. I could continue paying just for mom's medical bills, perhaps, or give them a longer runway to adjust their finances. But then I remembered their faces as they accused me of theft, my mother's silent complicity, my father's cold dismissal, and Olivia's satisfied smirk as she orchestrated my family exile while wearing the very necklace she had accused me of stealing. No, I decided. This clean break was necessary, not just for my financial well-being, but for my emotional health as well. They had made their choice, choosing to believe Olivia's lies over my lifetime of trustworthiness. Now they would have to live with the consequences of that choice. I sealed the envelope containing the letter and supporting documents, addressed it, and placed it beside my door to mail the next morning. Then I blocked Olivia's number on my phone, though I left my parents' lines open. If they wanted to apologize, I would listen, but I wouldn't subject myself to more accusations or manipulation. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The weight of unacknowledged sacrifice finally lifted from my shoulders. My family had failed me in the most fundamental way, but I would no longer fail myself. 3 days after mailing my letter, the first call came. It was my father, his voice a mixture of anger and panic. What the hell is this, Rebecca? Some kind of joke? It's not a joke, Dad, I replied calmly. Everything in that letter is true. I've been supporting this family financially for years, and this is how you've treated me in return. So this is revenge? Because we called you out about the necklace? I almost laughed at the absurdity. This isn't revenge, it's a consequence. You chose to believe I was a thief, despite everything you know about me. You threw me out of the house and the family. Why would I continue paying your bills after that? We relied on that money, he shouted. Yes, you did. Without ever acknowledging it. Without ever thanking me. Without ever even telling Olivia that her precious college education was being paid for by the sister she set up to look like a criminal. There was a long pause before he spoke again. What do you mean, set up? Olivia had the necklace all along, Dad. I saw it reflected in her phone screen the night you all confronted me. She deliberately hid it and planted the empty box to make me look guilty. And none of you, not one, considered that possibility. Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its bluster. You can't just cut us off without warning. The mortgage is due next week. I know exactly when it's due. I've been paying it for 3 years. Your mother's medication is covered by insurance for the next 30 days. After that, you'll need to figure something out. Maybe sell some of those expensive gifts you've been giving Olivia with my money. Rebecca, be reasonable. I think I've been more than reasonable for the past 3 years. Now, I'm being fair to myself. I ended the call and took a deep breath. It had been difficult, but nowhere near as painful as I'd anticipated. Setting boundaries, it seemed, got easier with practice. The next call came from my mother later that day. Unlike Dad, she didn't start with anger, but with tears. Rebecca, please. We just got a call from the mortgage company about a missed payment, and Olivia's university called about the tuition for next semester. I'm sorry you're in a difficult position, Mom, but those bills are your responsibility, not mine. How can you do this to us? We're your family. The guilt trip might have worked a week ago. Now, it just clarified how conditional their love had always been. Family works both ways, Mom. When one person is accused of theft and kicked out without a fair hearing, that's not family. That's a tribunal. We were upset about the necklace. People say things they don't mean when they're upset. Did Dad not mean it when he told me not to come back until I confessed to something I didn't do? Did you not mean it when you sat silently while everyone condemned me? Actions have consequences, Mom. This is the consequence of yours. After she hung up, I received a barrage of texts from Olivia. Unlike our parents, she didn't bother with emotional appeals. Her messages were direct accusations, calling me selfish, vindictive, and worse. I read them without responding, noting how quickly her mask of victimhood had fallen away now that her comfortable lifestyle was threatened. 2 days later, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Olivia's university financial aid office, asking about the withdrawal of tuition payment. I explained politely that I would no longer be covering my sister's educational expenses and suggested they direct all future inquiries to Olivia or our parents. The following week brought increasing desperation from my family. Dad left voicemails alternating between anger and attempts at reconciliation. Mom sent tearful texts about past due notices and calls from creditors. Olivia's messages became increasingly frantic as the reality of her situation sank in. I maintained my boundaries through it all, responding only to direct questions and refusing to engage with emotional manipulation. It wasn't easy. Years of conditioning had taught me to put their needs before my own, to be the family fixer, the reliable one who would always step in during a crisis. Breaking that pattern required constant vigilance against my own impulse to rescue them. 3 weeks after sending my letter, I received a text from Mom asking if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, choosing a neutral location and a short time frame to minimize the potential for drama. When I arrived at the cafe, I was surprised to find her alone. I had half expected the entire family to ambush me with another intervention. She looked tired, with new lines around her eyes and mouth. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "Of course," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "There's something you should know," she began, her fingers nervously shredding a napkin. "Olivia confessed about the necklace." I nodded, but said nothing. "She had it all along," Mom said. "She said she was jealous of you, of how Dad always talked about how responsible and successful you are. She thought if she could make you look bad, maybe they'd stop comparing her to you all the time." "I know," I said simply. I saw the necklace reflected in her phone that night at the house. Mom's eyes widened. "You knew? Why didn't you say something? Would anyone have believed me? You had all already decided I was guilty." She looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "We should have trusted you. I should have trusted you. I'm so sorry, Rebecca." Her apology seemed genuine, but I noticed it came only after Olivia's confession, not from her own realization that she had misjudged me. It also came after weeks of financial hardship, which made its sincerity questionable. "Thank you for telling me," I said carefully. "How are things at home?" She sighed. "Difficult. Your father had to ask for an advance at work to cover the mortgage. Olivia had to drop 2 classes because we couldn't pay the full tuition. She's taken a job at the campus bookstore, but it doesn't pay much." I nodded, acknowledging the information without offering help. The old Rebecca would have immediately stepped in, offered to cover the most urgent bills, fallen back into the familiar role of family savior. But I wasn't that person anymore. "And the necklace?" I asked. "She sold it," Mom admitted. "About a week after you left. She needed the money for a spring break trip she'd already committed to. She never expected you to stop paying for everything. None of us did." The irony was almost too perfect. Olivia had accused me of stealing and selling the necklace, then done exactly that herself when financial reality hit. "I hope you understand why I had to step back," I said. It wasn't just about the accusation. It was about years of taking my support for granted, of never acknowledging everything I was doing for the family. Mom nodded slowly. "Your father found all the payment records. The mortgage, the utilities, Olivia's tuition, we had no idea it was so much. You knew I was helping, you just never asked how much. We should have. I'm truly sorry, Rebecca. Not just for the necklace situation, but for everything. For taking advantage of your generosity for so long. We talked for another hour, more honestly than we had in years. She explained that Dad's pride had prevented him from acknowledging the extent of their financial dependence. I shared how hurt I'd been by their willingness to believe the worst of me. By the time we parted, something had shifted between us. Not forgiveness exactly, but a step toward understanding. That evening, Dad called. His apology was less eloquent than Mom's but seemed genuine in its awkwardness. He struggled to find words for his regret, eventually settling on a gruff, "I was wrong about you, and I'm sorry for that. More sorry than I can say." Olivia was the last to reach out, sending a letter rather than calling. She admitted orchestrating the whole scenario out of jealousy and resentment that had built over years. "You were always the perfect one," she wrote. "I just wanted them to see you weren't so perfect after all. I never thought it would go so far. I never thought you'd stop paying for everything." Her apology, like our parents', seemed motivated at least partially by financial consequences rather than genuine remorse. Still, it was a start, a recognition, at least, of the harm she had caused. In the weeks that followed, our family began the slow, awkward process of redefinition. My parents took full responsibility for their finances for the first time in years. Olivia reduced her course load and worked part-time to contribute to her education. And I maintained my financial independence, rebuilding my savings and focusing on my own future. It wasn't easy. There were slips back into old patterns, attempts at manipulation, moments of resentment on all sides. But gradually, a new dynamic emerged, one based on respect rather than exploitation, on honesty rather than comfortable lies. And through it all, I discovered something unexpected, a strength I didn't know I possessed. The capacity to stand firm in my own worth even when those I loved most tried to diminish it. The courage to demand the respect I deserved. The clarity to recognize that real love doesn't require endless sacrifice without acknowledgement. It was a painful lesson, but perhaps a necessary one for all of us. 6 months have passed since the day my family accused me of theft and I discovered the true cost of unconditional support. In that time, I've rebuilt not just my finances, but my sense of self-worth and my understanding of what healthy relationships should look like. The first few weeks after cutting financial ties with my family were surprisingly liberating. Without the constant drain on my resources, I was able to fully fund my emergency savings account for the first time in years. I increased my 401k contributions to the recommended 15% of my income. I even started researching investment properties, something that had seemed impossibly distant while supporting 4 adults on one income. But financial recovery was only part of my journey. The emotional wounds inflicted by my family's betrayal ran deeper than I initially realized. 2 months after our confrontation, I started seeing Dr. Lena Thompson, a therapist specializing in family dynamics and boundary setting. "What your family did," she told me during our first session, "was a form of emotional abandonment. They exploited your generosity, took you for granted, and then discarded you based on a false accusation. It's natural to feel grief, anger, and confusion about that experience." With Dr. Thompson's guidance, I began unpacking patterns that had been established long before the necklace incident, how I had been cast as the responsible caretaker from childhood, how my parents had subtly encouraged my sister's dependence while expecting self-sufficiency from me, how I had derived my sense of worth from being needed rather than being valued for who I was. People who consistently put others' needs before their own often struggle with feelings of guilt when they start setting boundaries, she explained. Remember that boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary for healthy relationships. Those words became my mantra on difficult days when doubt crept in. Was I being too harsh? Should I help with just one bill? Just this once? Whenever those thoughts arose, I reminded myself that boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary for healthy relationships. Around the same time I started therapy, I also began building a new social circle. For years, my family obligations had limited my availability for friendships. Now, with both time and financial resources at my disposal, I joined a hiking club, volunteered at a local coding boot camp for women, and reconnected with former colleagues. Through these connections, I discovered what genuine appreciation felt like. When I helped a boot camp student debug a challenging project, her heartfelt thanks meant more than years of unacknowledged family support. When I organized a weekend trip with my hiking group, their enthusiastic participation validated my efforts in a way my family never had. My career also flourished. Without the constant financial pressure, I took on challenging projects I might have previously avoided due to time constraints, earning a promotion and substantial raise 4 months after the family confrontation. For the first time, that additional income went toward my own future, rather than supporting others who took me for granted. As for my family, our relationship evolved gradually, and not without setbacks. My parents struggled to adjust to financial independence after years of relying on my support. Dad took on additional weekend work. Mom found a part-time job she could manage despite her health limitations. They downsized from the family home to a smaller, more affordable apartment. 3 months after our confrontation, Olivia sent me a lengthy letter that felt different from her initial apology. Where her first note had focused primarily on justifications and excuses, this one demonstrated genuine self-reflection. "I've been thinking a lot about why I did what I did," she wrote. "It wasn't just jealousy of how Mom and Dad treated you. It was knowing, somewhere deep down, that I didn't deserve the lifestyle I had, that I hadn't earned it the way you earned everything in your life. It was easier to tear you down than to build myself up. I'm trying to do the hard work now. I got a second job this semester. I'm actually going to all my classes for the first time. I'm paying for things with money I earned myself, and it feels different. Better, somehow. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I'm trying to change." Her letter touched me more deeply than I expected. Not enough to resume financial support, but enough to consider rebuilding some form of relationship. We started with occasional text messages, then coffee every few weeks. Our conversations were cautious at first, avoiding any mention of money or the necklace incident. Over time, we developed a tentative new dynamic, not the close sisterhood I had once imagined, but something more honest than what we had before. For months after the confrontation, I agreed to help my parents with a specific, limited expense, Mom's specialized medication that wasn't fully covered by insurance. I made it clear this was a choice, not an obligation, and established firm boundaries around my contribution. The money would go directly to the pharmacy, not to them. The arrangement would be reassessed every 3 months. And most importantly, this support was conditional on continued respectful treatment. "I'm willing to help with this specific need," I told them, "but if there's ever another incident where my character is questioned without cause, or where my generosity is taken for granted, the support ends immediately and permanently." They accepted these terms without argument, a sign that perhaps they too had learned from the experience. Dad, in particular, seemed transformed by the ordeal. His pride had taken a significant hit when he had to admit his financial dependence on his daughter, but once that initial hurdle was crossed, he demonstrated genuine humility. "I always thought providing for my family made me a man," he confessed during a rare heart-to-heart conversation. "When I couldn't do that anymore, I felt like a failure. I let you take over because it was easier than admitting I had failed. That wasn't fair to you, and I'm sorry." 5 months after the confrontation, we attempted our first family dinner since the accusation. It was awkward at times, with conversations stalling whenever we approached sensitive topics. But there was also a new authenticity to our interactions. Without the unspoken financial arrangement underlying everything, we were forced to relate to each other simply as people, not as provider and dependent. Olivia, now working 2 part-time jobs while taking a reduced course load, spoke about her classes with newfound enthusiasm. "It feels different when you're paying for it yourself," she admitted. "I actually go to every lecture now. Funny how that works." Mom shared updates about her new part-time job at a local florist, where she arranged deliveries and helped with simple bouquets. "It's not much money," she said, "but it feels good to contribute something." Dad talked about the community college courses he was taking to update his construction management skills. "Never too old to learn new tricks," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "Should have done this years ago instead of just complaining about how the industry changed." As I listened to them describe their new lives, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: pride in their resilience, sadness for the years wasted in unhealthy patterns, hope for what our relationship might become, and underneath it all, a quiet confidence in my own worth that had been missing before. The journey hasn't been easy for any of us. There have been tense conversations, financial setbacks, moments of resentment on all sides. But through it all, we've moved towards something more honest and balanced than what we had before. Today, as I reflect on everything that's happened, I find myself grateful for the painful lesson that necklace incident taught me. Without it, I might have continued sacrificing my financial future indefinitely, seeking validation that would never come. I might never have discovered my own strength, or learned the crucial difference between supporting others and enabling dependency. The most important thing I've learned is that true family supports each other's growth, not each other's stagnation. Real love doesn't demand constant sacrifice without recognition, and self-respect isn't selfish, it's the foundation upon which all healthy relationships must be built. If you're in a situation where your generosity is being taken for granted, where your sacrifices go unacknowledged, where your character is questioned despite your consistent actions, please know this: you deserve better. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. Standing up for yourself isn't wrong. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to stop enabling destructive patterns. I don't know what the future holds for my family. We're still navigating this new terrain, still learning how to relate to each other as equals rather than as provider and dependent. But whatever happens, I know I'll face it with a stronger sense of self-worth and clearer boundaries than I had before.